From analog.
Hi, Jim. You have a great signal up here. You're 5.9 plus.
To digital.
We are everywhere you want to be. This is the CQ Blind Hams Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CQ Blind Hams Techzoom for March 2024. This is an interactive discussion that takes place monthly where we discuss a topic related to ham radio, of course, from a blindness perspective. So I want to welcome everybody who is here, joining us live, as well as those who are listening at home on the podcast. We appreciate you being here. So to learn more about what we do and how to get involved with what we're doing and all that good stuff, as well as get access to a lot of very valuable and handy information, please visit our website, www.blindhams.com, and have fun with all the stuff there, including how to get involved at the Blind Hams Bridge and connect with us. And we'd love to hear as many people join us as possible. So without further ado, let's go ahead right into our hosts and crew here and see what everyone's been up to since our last meeting. Joel, W0QA, what's going on with you?
Well, not a whole lot, Julian. We got some exciting podcast or show tonight, and I can't wait for everybody to hear part of our new team. Back to you, Julian.
Oh, yeah, good stuff. Can't wait to get into that. Robert, NC5R, how are things in Texas?
Oh, things are good, Julian. Hot here already in the mid-80s today, but that's okay. I like it that way. Been playing a lot of radio with my new THD 75 and my new Open Spot 4 Pro. I've been really enjoying delving into D-Star, and everything else is going on around here. It's just one thing after another. So I'm looking forward to settling down and enjoying this Techzoom. Back to you, Julian.
Ah, good stuff. You got all the cool new shiny toys. Awesome. And I'm with you about the weather as well. Can't wait for it to start doing that here where I am. But we're on our way. Steve, WB2KTV, what's happening in the city that never sleeps?
It was a beautiful day in my neighborhood today. We had low 70s. I think spring is definitely upon us. But it's rumored it's going to get cold again. Now, my new toy is sitting on a UPS truck somewhere between 34th and 11th and my QTH, which is not all that far away. I am sitting here with bated breath, waiting for my parcel app to go ding-dong, which will let me know it's been delivered. I kind of think, considering the hour, I'm not going to have that happen tonight. So you can bet that tomorrow morning I'll be first in line. I'll be first in line at the old concierge desk to pick up my package and open my brand new THD 75.
Oh, that is awesome. And a new member of our team here who is going to actually have some really exciting, cool new news for us. But I figure I'll let you get in here and on this part of the discussion. Steve W0QA. How are you?
Well, good evening. Yeah, I'm doing good. I've spent the morning doing a lot of audio production work, and then I think we hit 67 here in Wichita, Kansas today. I sat out on my deck this afternoon and listened to Wichita State University men's basketball game, and that's kind of how I spent most of the day today.
Sounds awesome. Very good stuff. And yeah, again, we're so looking forward to all the stuff you're going to be sharing with us here momentarily. Well, last but not least, it is me, Julian, N1CA, located in Southern California, where I think we had similar temperatures to what New York City had, with a lot of wind, though. Man, we had quite the wind event, which is not quite normal for this time of year. But then again, everything this year so far has not been quite normal in terms of rainfall, in terms of all kinds of craziness. But I guess it can't be said that Southern California never gets interesting weather. So the last couple of years, it has seemed to be defying of that. So having said all that, I just want to put in a good word here for what we do. And we'd like those of you who are here as well as listening at home to spread the good word about blind hams. Again, the website, www.blindhams.com, as well as our podcast. We put out a lot of good, informative podcasts. And one of the ways of getting that information is our YouTube channel. And this content on our channel can be helpful to many people, obviously people who are blind or low vision, but also increasingly I've heard from people that are not blind and low vision that enjoy our podcast because of the way that we explain things, narrate things. So, we do cover a lot of wide variety of topics, and it's very well done. And, feel free to share it with people, even those who are not blind.
And if I might just drop in one key phrase, when you go there,
ahead.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Yep, that's what I was getting to.
Okay.
So when you're on our YouTube channel, as Steve said, please like, share, subscribe, and view, listen, whatever. Even if you just put it on in the background, it actually helps us in many ways. Because this allows us to monetize what we put up there on YouTube. And the proceeds of that all go toward helping to put accessible radios, in the hands of blind hams, especially new blind hams, to get them active. So this is a very important thing. It's a cause very near and dear to our hearts, and we hope yours as well. So again, as Steve said, like, share, subscribe, spread the word, use your social media channels, and put it on in the background. It's I understand it's convenient to listen to podcasts on a podcast app, so do that as well. But also, once in a while, just give the YouTube channel a listen, because it actually helps us in terms of hours and minutes that are viewed. So, Joel, maybe you could help fill in here if I leave anything out, but just to share some stats with you that I've received recently regarding our YouTube channel. I understand we've had 28 new subscribers, I think, since the last time we spoke.
Yeah,
we've got
700 mark finally. Climbing toward 1,000. We're looking for 1,000 subscribers. That's a good number, and we're looking for that.
Yeah, we got to keep working at that. We've got 1,640 total views, which is good. Again, keep that number climbing, and 12,800 minutes watched, if I'm reading that stat correctly. So that's pretty good. Again, this all helps in our efforts to monetize and then take those proceeds and put radios in the hands of blind hams. So now that we've covered all that, I want to go ahead and get to our guest speaker. Very much looking forward to what he's got to offer, because he's bringing in yet another offering to the CQ Blind Hams family. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Steve W0QA.
Okay. Well, earlier discussion wanted me to talk about my broadcast experience and how I got into that. And we'll talk about that for a minute and then get into the new podcast. During the years when I was in middle school or junior high, whatever term you want to use, my dad at that time worked at Boeing, and in that period, he was in the training department. And whenever they replaced old tape recorders and microphones and stuff, instead of throwing them in the trash, he brought me a bunch of junk home. And so I set up all this stuff in my bedroom, and I played DJ and kept messing with that. And when I was a senior in high school, I actually started doing some on-air shifts at the local university's radio station, of course, all volunteer, and continued working at that station as a volunteer, and then a little while even as a paid student while I was attending college. And then it was in 1974 that the FCC sort of changed the rules and said that stations couldn't simulcast all of the time. They could only simulcast 25% of the time. So a local AM and FM station, they broke simulcast and let the AM station go country. And I went in for an interview, didn't know a thing about country music. And the manager, said he would hire me, put me on nights and weekends and that kind of thing. And I said, I just don't know that much about country music. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "Son, we'll learn you." So that's kind of how that started. And just a short time after that station signed on, I wound up being hired full time, did middays for a while, and then moved into afternoon drive. And then unfortunately, about 2.5 years later, the station owners made some stupid decisions and basically killed the station by what they did. So I quit and went to work for a local bank where I was at there for almost 39 years. And during the time I was working for the bank, I went to work for a group of stations here in town, all owned by the same company, doing severe weather, because the news director that I had worked with had gone over to work for that group of stations, and he called me and he said, "Man, I need somebody to help me do severe weather, evenings and overnights and weekends." And so I did that for, oh my goodness, from 1989 until 2002. And that was quite a challenge sometimes because I'd be on the radio in the middle of the night doing severe weather, and I still had to get up and go to work and do my regular job during the day. But along about 2001, I hooked up with the American Council of the Blind and ACB Radio Interactive channel where you could sign on and do shows. And I started doing actually 2 shows. I did a jazz show and a country music show. And things went well, but along about 2003, through I guess just a stroke of luck, talking with the program director of a station here in town, and I was actually trying to get back on the air doing more weather stuff because I thought that's all I could do. And I said, "Or you could let me do a jazz show for you." And he said, "Talk to me. I want a jazz show." And in 5 minutes, we shook hands. I mean, he knew me. I didn't have to do an air check or anything. We shook hands, and for almost 20 years, I did a Sunday morning jazz show on that station. And then corporate people had other ideas, which made no sense at all. But so I was on a different little station here in town for about 1.5 years. But in November last year, I moved to a full power FM station, and I'm now doing a jazz show on Sunday evening from 6 until 9 p.m. And that's working quite well. It's pushed me into a whole new realm because I've got to do my own sales, invoicing, collecting, the whole bit. So, but that's kind of the radio stuff. I first was licensed as a ham in 1972. Got a technician. Had a horrible call letter. I mean, my call letters were WB0 India Yankee. And I hated that call from the day I opened the envelope and read that little piece of paper. And after upgrading to general a few years later, kept going. And then I think it was in 1982, I upgraded to advanced. And of course, I couldn't pick my call letters, but I wound up getting Kilowatt Charlie Zero Hotel Foxtrot, which is really a pretty cool call. But in 86, after I upgraded to extra, one of my best friends basically said, "Man, you got to get a 1x2. You worked all that time to get your license. You got to get a 1x2. So that's when I could put a list of calls together, and W0QA was the second call. I don't even remember what my first one on the list was. But anyway, it was the second call, and the FCC gave it to me. So that's kind of where it goes. And I cannot believe I passed that 20 word a minute code test, but I did. And I'm glad I don't ever have to pass it again. Throughout the late 80s and into the 90s, I worked extensively with Bill Pasternak and the amateur radio newsline people, doing stories and special features and that type of thing. And then worked with a local ham, and we broadcast the amateur radio newsline on one of our big repeaters, which is no longer on the air and at the level on the tower that it was. But we did that for several years, and then through a variety of things, it just kind of came to the point where we really couldn't do it anymore. But early one morning here, a 3 weeks ago, was talking with some people, and discussions led to doing a podcast of information and stories of interest to blind and visually impaired hams. So the Blind Ham News podcast idea was born. And that resulted in me being involved in this. I'm going to start off slow because I don't want to overcommit, but the plan is to do at least one podcast a month. We could do more if we get enough stories and ideas sent in. And so the first podcast is finished, and it is premiering this evening. During that podcast, you will hear contact information. There are 2 ways you can get story ideas sent to me. We have a new email address for it. And you can write stuff in as a message, or you can record and attach an MP3 to that email. Or we have voicemail set up, which is available 24/7, and you can call and leave information on that. And like I say, that contact information will be given twice during the podcast that you're going to hear. They're not going to be long. I don't want to do a podcast that's going to make you sit there for an hour or two. Most of the podcasts I'm going to target in the 5 to 7 minute range. Now, what that means is there might be a podcast that might be 4 minutes. There might be one that'll be 8 or 9 minutes, but the target time will be 5 to 7. So it's not going to tie you to your device for an extended period of time. You'll have the opportunity to listen and enjoy something that we hope will be interesting to you and moving at a decent pace. So
Good
that's
evening.
pretty well my introduction. Was
All
there
right,
someone
so-
that?
Is my audio
What-
working? This is Steve with Alpha Antenna.
Hey, you're fine, Steve.
Oh, excellent.
Hang on a second, because we had to kind of rearrange the lineup here. So we will get to you momentarily, Steve from Alpha. So Steve W0QA, what is the name of this podcast going to be?
Going to call it the Blind Ham News Podcast.
All right. And what is the aim of the podcast?
Well, as I said earlier, just stories, news, and information of interest to blind and visually impaired hams, hoping to enhance your enjoyment of the amateur radio hobby.
Wow, I think this is great because, and I like the fact that it's starting out at, in a small size like that, because a lot of times, as you pointed out, it's like, sometimes you have all kinds of things going on, and you may not necessarily want to sit there for 20 something minutes through a podcast. So I'd like the idea that this is going to be short, short and sweet, but give us some useful information. So I, for one, I'm very much looking forward to this.
As I say, we live in a microwave society. Put it in, turn it on, take it out.
Yep. That's it.
Well, I think that Steve W0QA is going to play podcast number 1 right now.
This is Blind Ham News, with stories of interest to blind and visually impaired hams. With today's report, here is Steve Bauer W0QA.
Welcome to the Blind Ham News Podcast. This is episode number 1. What we're going to do with this podcast is make it available through the CQ Blind Hams podcast feed that is already in place. And we're going to give you news and information on topics and stories of interest to blind and visually impaired hams. Now, there are a couple of ways you can submit story ideas and information, and I will give you that information in just a few seconds. We are going to release podcasts periodically, not on a scheduled basis, kind of base it on how much information and the stories that we receive. So if you have story ideas or suggestions or information that you would like to pass along, here's the email address. It's blindhamnews@gmail.com. blindhamnews@gmail.com. You can also call and leave a voicemail message if you would like, and that phone number is 662-426-6397. It's 662-HAM-NEWS. So that's a couple of ways you can submit story ideas as we begin a new podcast feature, and looking forward to seeing it grow. This week I am talking with Derick Flint, KC1QXL from Washington, Vermont. He was involved in providing communications and getting assistance for some other ham radio operators whose car had become stuck on, well, almost going over a cliff on some ice. So we're going to learn about that adventure and how it all played out. Oftentimes, cell phones just don't work, but in many cases, ham radio does work. And Derick Flint from Washington, Vermont had an experience where cell phones didn't work and ham radio did. Derick's call is KC1QXL. Derick, thanks for joining us here on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to join you guys, and I'm really excited to be a ham radio operator. Had a lot of fun doing it and been enjoying myself.
How long have you been licensed?
I have been licensed for 2 years this month in March, so been a really long ride. Been really enjoying it, and I'm working on getting my general at this point.
Well, congratulations. Well, you were involved in a situation where some people were in a bad way and they were calling for help, and you were able to help them out. We're actually going to let the audio from a video from YouTube tell the full story, but kind of lead us into what happened, if you would.
One day I was sitting down having lunch, and I heard the radio going off. It was on the Mount Washington repeater, the W1NH. And it kept going off with a little bit of static here, a little bit of noise there, and every so often you would hear a little bit of audio and here and there, and and then I was like, it seems like somebody's ka-chunking way too many times to try to see if they can get in the repeater, so that it must be some sort of emergency thing. So I went over and started working my way through the situation, and we ended up able to get some help to the people and get them all rescued. So definitely a life-changing experience by all means. Something I was never expecting to have part in.
Have you had any contact with the hams that you talked to and you helped rescue?
Yes. I actually talked to Nick and Ben on the internet and on the radio, I would say frequently. We do want to meet this summer. We're hoping to have a meetup with Roger, one of my friends that helped me with the rescue, and then we're going to hopefully meet up with Nick and Ben and do a face-to-face. It'll be really cool to see.
Well, Derick, you did a great job in getting help to some people that were in desperate need and kind of let ham radio shine.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was never expecting WMUR to do that newscast on us. It was the New Hampshire Chronicles, and it was almost heard worldwide at times, because there was people up in Quebec that did an article on us, and then there was stuff throughout the United States, and there was actually some people that reached out from overseas as well. So definitely an inspiration, and when I first got in the hobby, I was never expecting to do anything like this. I got in the hobby because I'm visually impaired, and you don't need good vision to talk on the radio. That's one of the reasons why I joined.
Yeah, we're still probably 30 miles from Mount Washington.
It was December 4th, 2022.
Repeat your question. I heard something, but I couldn't quite copy.
Ham radio operator Derick Flint had his radio on.
It's like it was yesterday. It was one of those amazing things.
When he heard something unusual in the static.
This is KC1QXL. I'm here. There's still no audio.
What he didn't know There were two men stranded in northern New Hampshire, and those radios were about to save their lives.
We got there, the conditions were snowy, but not icy.
On that fateful morning, Nick Lang of Plastow and his friend Ben were driving around Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, a place he'd been many times. Nick was prepared. He happens to be an emergency response volunteer and licensed ham radio operator.
So my call sign is KC1OTX. That's Kilo Charlie 1 Oscar Tango X-ray.
He packed a small handheld radio for his trip.
I put it in my car as a last-minute thing.
He'd need it when the conditions on a remote road turned very icy.
As soon as the traction control kicked on, that's when I decided it was time to turn around. And when I turned around is when everything kind of went wrong.
The car started sliding.
We ended up spinning 3 complete times, the full 360.
Hanging over an embankment, Nick couldn't open his door. So Ben got out to secure the car with rope so it wouldn't slide more.
He was cranking it, and the hook snapped and launched across the road and smashed his kneecap.
Ben was injured. The car was stuck, and there was no cell service to call for help. So Nick climbed to higher ground to see if anyone could hear him on his ham radio.
I was saying my call sign. I was saying SOS. I was saying 911. I was saying emergency.
He was in luck. The Mount Washington repeater picked up his call so other operators could hear it, like Derick Flint, some 54 miles from Mount Washington in Vermont. Derick is visually impaired and fell in love with radio only months before. Now, he was thrown into a radio-driven rescue.
I was over there for like a half an hour trying to get something, and what ended up happening was I ended up getting him to say like 911.
Yeah, that was a harder copy that time, but I didn't copy that your vehicle went off the road into a ditch, I believe you said.
At the time, I couldn't hear their complete call sign, but I heard somebody, and that gave me hope.
By now, another radio op, Roger Marcoux in Bartlett, was listening in.
W1XCJ from K1DFA.
He, too, was trying to hear where the stranded men were through the static.
This is McGalloway Road, and we did get, syllable by syllable, we got that they were on McGalloway Road.
Finally, a location. 911 was called, but a rescue was still hours away.
There's 2 people in there now, potentially. I know one of the firefighters is going to try the ham radio side, but I'm not sure if he's out there or not.
Back in Vermont, Derick could barely hear updates from the men stuck in Pittsburgh.
So at this point, we'll just do this since your signal's horrible.
A code system with no words.
I said do 1 ka-chunk for yes and nothing for no.
And it worked.
We thought we heard him say icy, and then we said, did you say icy? And then they said yes, and they said, so we're assuming icy road. Did you go off the road? And then they clicked yes, they went off the road.
While Roger and Derick waited anxiously for about 3 hours, they finally heard rescue crews arrived. Ben and Nick were safe. The guys breathed a sigh of relief.
But thank you very much for all the help today, Roger. It was an amazing thing we did. And hopefully we don't have to do it anytime soon.
The guy goes, thank you. Thank you very much for saving my life today. So that said it all right there. I mean, it was pretty serious on their end for sure. So.
Have a story or information to submit for the podcast? Send it by email to blindhamnews@gmail.com or call 662-426-6397. That's 662-HAM-NEWS. Thanks for your help.
I'm Steve W0QA, and that's the report this time. I hope you can join me again for another Blind Ham News podcast. 73, and thanks for listening.
Wow, that is pretty cool. Very, very cool.
So I'm working on ideas for podcast number 2, and we'll see what happens with people submitting story ideas and information, and take it from there. So we'll look forward to episode number 2 coming out in April.
Yep, I certainly will look forward to that. It's a good addition here to the CQ Blind Hams family of podcasts. So again, look for this where you get all of our podcasts, and make use of that information to get stories to Steve. And let's keep this going. I think this is really neat concept. So does anybody here have any questions or anything for Steve?
Thank you, Steve, for coming on board, and welcome to the CQ Blind Hams family.
Well, we'll just do our best to keep things going, because I think it's important to get as much news and information out there as we can. And hopefully some hams will also find it interesting who are not blind or visually impaired.
Well, all right, Julian, I think our guest is here tonight. If you want to go ahead and introduce Steve.
All right, so we'll go to our guest speaker here. This is Steve from Alpha Antenna. He is going to tell us about a cool new product. It's a mag loop tuning device for blind hams. So without further ado, Steve from Alpha Antennas, the floor is yours.
There are some real emotions in that podcast. That's what I love about podcasts, and just don't like listening to news that much. But podcasts, they carry meaning, I think, with especially from amateur radio, where we all share that connection. So let me ask first if the audio is okay.
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
Great.
Anybody else have any issues with the audio?
No, it could be just a little bit higher, but it's good and clear. You got good clear audio.
I'll normalize it, Steve. Don't worry about it. The other thing is, Steve, I made you a co-host in case you had any slides to share.
Thank you, Angelo. So I'm going to just use audio. And so with the advent of a lot of things in my own life that happened 17 years ago, I came to the understanding that really the only thing that you leave when you depart this earth is what you create. And so I became very interested in creating things for others that nobody else has done. It's sort of like painting a picture. And nobody else can do what you're doing when you paint. I've seen elephants paint pictures. I've seen the chimps with Jane Goodall paint pictures. And even the primates, they have such an innate ability to create. And all of these things I've learned since my own accident happened when I was hit head-on by a semi-truck 17 years ago, and had to go through the rehabilitations and such things. And when I came out of that, it was amateur radio that was there for me the whole time. The thing I wanted to do, I wanted to give back to ham radio, something that was on my heart, just wouldn't let go because of that event. The whole thing started in 1979, which is when I got my license, after my uncle, who was putting towers in Saudi Arabia for the king, was writing to me about this thing called ham radio. ham radio sat for a while and did nothing in my life. But for the first 6 years, it was all I could do to do was just send CW, send Morse code. And that's what I did from when I got my license in junior high and until I graduated high school, and then life got busy. Then life stopped, as I mentioned, 17 years ago. And the important things came back. That tends to happen when you have a life-changing event. Well, fast forward to today. Alpha was created because it means beginning, and it was the beginning for my life. And a lot of things stand in our way to enable us. And that's when we became more and more ADA compliant over the years as I learned what ADA was. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't understand. And so I had an idea in my head that one day I'll be able to supply antennas that a person in a wheelchair can deploy. I'll develop this antenna that's in my mind that a ham who has no vision, like zero vision, can put their arms all the way around it, and it can operate from 10 to 80 meters. And that's the mag loop that we build. And so when I go to shows and I've been going to Hamfest for about, as a vendor, for about 10 years. I would see a lot of my friends come over who were blind or sight impaired, and they would reach out and they give me a hug, and I'd say, "Let me show you this new thing." And then it was the mag loop. I said, "What you're putting your hands around, because it's a circle, right? That's only 3 feet across. You're feeling the whole antenna. You're seeing the whole antenna." And for a long time, there was go ahead and tune it by audio in your radio. Well, as time went on, I found out that the audio in the radio only gets you about to 7-to-1 SWR. And if you're really good, if your hearing is very good, you can maybe get it down to 4.5-to-1. Past that point, the audio coming out of the radio does not change significantly enough to really warrant to say, "Oh yeah, I'm below 2.5-to-1 or 2-to-1." So I decided to find out if there was any type of device floating around in my head that would make a sound when RF is detected. And I remembered a class that I took. I went to college when I was in junior high also, and I remember this class I took in electronics. And what it is, it's an RF pickup that converts RF to DC. And so I thought, well, let's see if I can get all the parts and figure it out again. And so about 3 months later, I had all the parts together, and this would have been last fall. And I put all the parts together right out of the box. First time, it was a wiring mess. Like spaghetti in a pan. But I turned on the radio. I turned it into CW mode, and I put whatever I had with me on my key. I'm a straight key operator. And the key transmits, and I walk over to the loop. I put this thing, I call it an SWR sounder, right there beside the loop, right there where those barrels connect into the tuning box. And I reach over, grab the knob, and I start tuning. And I heard a little chirp, chirp, chirp coming from the speaker. And then I tuned a little bit more, and then the chirp turned to a solid beep. And I knew it was like Benjamin Franklin, or it was like Thomas and Edison moment for me. because I knew right then and there that I had finally created the one thing, an SWR sounder, that could tell us what the SWR was just by listening to the sounds, sort of like kerchunk. One means no, two kerchunks means yes. Well, the SWR sounder was sitting there, and I also had one of these, what I call an MFJ giant meter, and it's a huge meter, and it's probably a 5-inch by 5-inch meter on the front of this SWR meter they build. And I watched the SWR swing down, and when that thing was going chirp, 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 it was right below 2.5 to 1. So it took a 2.5 to 1 SWR RF output, because the less, the less the SWR is, the more ERP there is. And so that's how it works. And so then I tuned it to about 1.8 to 1, and that's when I got the solid beep. So this indicator, this SWR sounder, actually tells you by the sound it makes if you're below 2.5 to 1 or if you're below 2 to 1, which for me, that was a game changer. For one very big reason, I'll operate the loop outdoors when my radio is indoors. I'll turn my radio into 5 watts transmit with the key down, walk outside with my sounder, and I can tune that loop remotely without needing to listen to the sound coming out of that speaker. That was a game changer for me as a sighted person, right? And so I also love to do POTA. And if I can keep from taking that 1 pound SWR meter or analyzer with me, that's awesome. This thing weighs about an ounce, and it's only 3 inches by 2 inches in size by about an inch high. Simple. I just put that in the bag and it weighs nothing. So I love doing that for my POTA work now too. So that's the SWR sounder. We do have other things, like something called the HOA buster, that if you can find your downspout, you can install an antenna that works on 10 through 80 meters. And you don't have to climb a ladder or do anything. You just shove a stake in the ground and put a clip on the downspout. And that's your antenna. That giant antenna is your gutter, or the giant gutter is your antenna, depending on where you look at it. So we're always looking for new things that we can help people out with. And that one helped a lot of disabled hands. So that's sort of my story and the story behind that device. I do so much appreciate being able to listen to that podcast and be able to meet with you all tonight. It's been a good night. My son is here from the Marines, and he just retired. Got his family here, been staying with us for a little over a week, and he leaves Sunday. So it'll be a sad time. But thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Steve, for joining. This is Joel W0QA. I'm the one that contacted you. You have several other antennas that you sell. Don't you have some verticals, POTA type verticals, and something called a hexantenna?
Oh, yes.
Are there any other antennas you'd like to tell us about?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well done. Let me get my dog. Come here. There you go. You're a good girl. Oh, my dog goes with me everywhere. I call her my truck dog. She's a really good emotional dog. Okay. But yeah, so we made some touch-free, tuner-free systems so that people with mobility issues do not have to keep going back to their antenna and moving a tap on a clip and adjusting whips. And that's a touch-free vertical antenna that we make for POTA that goes in a little bag. It's about 4 inches by 4 inches by maybe 21 inches, I think the bag is, and everything goes in it. The magic sauce behind that is it's actually an off-center fed vertical dipole. Wrap your head around that for a second. It's an off-center fed dipole, but it's an off-center fed vertical dipole. Electrically, it looks like an off-center fed dipole, but physically, it doesn't. And it puts, and you can just mount it right there on a little tripod in front of you. So that's one of the favorites of people with mobility issues. And the loop seems to be the most popular with the sighted. And then I made basically an antenna in honor of my Elmer. And his name is Pete Sias, and he does the moon bounce. He has microwave systems, and it's amazing. He's amazing. And so he said one time, why don't you just make a big, huge antenna that can mount with a single mounting point, and make it so it's fully resonant, make it so it can do full legal limit, and make it so it will fit in a 26 by 5 by 5 inch bag.
He didn't ask for much.
No. Right? And so what I ended up doing, it took me 3.5 years to do it. A lot of times people say, why are your antennas so expensive? Sorry, that's a very funny question that I get asked. Well, sometimes it takes 3.5 years, and you're going to pay me for that time. But mainly, it's because all of our employees are W-2. We have health insurance. We give them 401ks. My will is written to give them the company when I die. We donate a lot to veterans. Just the whole gamut of giving back is a lot of the reason that we're going to charge more for the antennas, and the people who have the funds are going to buy the antennas, and that money will be used to help others. For example, just tonight, I don't know how personal I should get, but just tonight I was sitting in the bathroom and I opened my phone up and it says, hi, funds are tight right now. I met you at Hamcation. Can you not charge shipping? Is there a coupon for free shipping that you could give me? Because I'm not going to be able to get this antenna for several months. And I don't want to wait that long because I have cancer. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I just sent out the cancer email. We do a lot with cancer research and stuff. And it's like, so don't even ask any more than that. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, how do I respond? But a lot of times we get these emails. And another one of my favorite emails of all time was, hi, I got the antenna. I've been using it. It works great. I got it about 2 weeks ago, and I got some unaccepted bills that came due. I need to return it for a refund. Well, we're going to let them have the antenna, keep it forever, and send them the refund. We're going to do both. And so that's how we run the company. That's how I run the company, and that's how now everybody else in the company thinks. So back to the Hextenna. This Hextenna and my mentor, 3.5 years in development, I finally, and so I'll say this slowly, I finally developed an antenna that is a dipole. And in the same system, this antenna can be a vertical. This system has frequency coverage continuously from 440 megahertz to 7.0 megahertz. That's a lot. 440 megahertz to 7.0 megahertz continuous coverage at legal limit that fits in a 26 by 5 by 5 bag. I did it. I built the antenna he asked for in honor of PSIS. So, it's, for me, it's personal, as you can tell. And I love from my heart doing what I do. Let's see.
Could you explain that? I was reading the website and looking at that antenna, and it fascinated me, but not being able to see how it's designed or what it looks like. I was just wondering if you would take a second and just explain how it's laid out.
That's easy. No problem. First of all, even if you've never seen a stop sign, you're going to know what a stop sign looks like. It's a hexagon. Am I right?
Yeah.
So there is a hub that looks like a stop sign. And that hub is about 5.5 inches across, just like a tiny stop sign. On the bottom leg of that stop sign, or the hextenna, thus the hexagon, hextenna hub, is a mounting bolt, 3/8 24 stainless steel mounting bolt. That hub will mount on one of two things. It'll mount on our mast mount, so you can install that hub on the mast mount that goes on a 1 1/4 inch mast, or you can install on something that we call the HD tripod. We have people just buying that tripod to put other people's antennas on, because the HD tripod can take 50-mile-per-hour winds when it's fully deployed in an upright position with these huge antennas on it. Or if you spread the legs out, spread eagle, all the way flat on the ground, it can take up to an F1 tornado. So that is the true emergency communication responders tripod. Now, those are the two mounting systems, which is as important as the antenna, because if you can't keep the antenna from blowing over, what's the point? Now, back to the hextenna hub that looks like a stop sign. The bottom right leg, that starts to go a little bit vertical, is where the SO239 is. So keep in mind, this is a housing that's 5.5 inches across and about 4 inches deep. The next, so if you go, that's to the right. If you go to the left, just opposite the, just to the left of the mounting bolt, there is a place for a counterpoise wire on a little tiny bolt. And the bolt has a wing nut on it. You unscrew the wing nut, and you slide the ring connector on for the counterpoise, and you put the wing nut back on. When that counterpoise is in position, the telescopic whips, which you get 2 of them, but you're only going to use one when there's a counterpoise involved. That first, that goes on the vertical mounting stud, which is right on top. So it's the top of the stop sign, or the top of the hub where you screw that vertical telescopic whip in. Tuning is accomplished by extending the telescopic whip before you install it out to a certain measurement. We tell you, we show you, you got all the information on our instruction card. So our instruction manuals are now the size of postcards on everything. And it's sort of funny because sometimes we'll see a YouTube channel, they'll say, this is rather disappointing, there's no instruction manual. We make one assumption, and it's a bad assumption, but we're going to make it because it's the right assumption. And that is, you became a ham radio operator because you studied, paid attention, and learned what 468 divided by frequency in megahertz is. If you didn't, it's not too late. But we're not going to teach you in our manuals. You're going to learn from your study guides. You're going to learn from your Elmers. And we're going to give you something about the size of a postcard. We call it a field guide to get you on the air. Because who wants to read a manual when you're sitting out there in the field? Do we have full-size manuals? You bet we do. But we're not going to send it with the antenna. You can print it on your own printer if you want, or you can read it because they're all ADA compliant and have your computer read it to you. Back to the extenna. You've got that telescopic vertical measured out using your, I don't know, are there Braille measuring tapes?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Talking tape measure.
Oh, yeah. I remember that now. So you could measure that with this, and we give you a starting point where it's like, okay, there's your 18 feet 3 inches, where's your 13 feet 12 inches for whatever band. So now you got your vertical element and a counterpoise. Before I tell you about the dipole, I'm going to tell you there's nothing inside that housing but direct wiring to the SO239 connector and that counterpoise element being on the barrel side and the vertical element being on the center pin. Now for the next thing, which is so much fun. Take that vertical element off, measure it out to be the length of the dipole that you need it to be. Take the other element and just simply extend it to the element that you just extended. Don't measure twice for both elements. Just extend the second element out as far as the first element is deployed. So what happens if you're sitting there and you're going, oh, where do I install these on this match? Well, I can't remember. On the match, we have in raised lettering, vertical element. Raised element, and then we have raised lettering for the word counterpoise. Everything is labeled so that if you're sight impaired, you can still make out the letters just by touch, where everything installs on this hex hub. So the last two mounting points. Up at the top of the stop sign, where the vertical element was, just to the right, sloping down, dipole element 1 is what the label is. That's where one of them goes. Go to the other side, where it's sloping down, still up top, dipole element 2. But, Steve, people say, that's not a dipole. It's like a V dipole. Correct. How many ohms? Okay, and this is a test for the class. Anybody who knows the answer, shout it out. How many ohms does a flat top normal dipole have?
72. Right
72, right about there. Now we're going to get a little more advanced. What happens if you bring those wires closer into a V configuration to those same ohms? What do they become?
Close to 50.
Magic. No, it's science. Exactly right. No ballons, no unons, no chokes, no coils of wire to change it from 50 ohms to 72 or 72 to 50 back and forth. No confusion. It's a perfect antenna in memory of my Elmer, because that's what he built. A perfect antenna that can take full legal limit digital. Well, who would want to do that? Well, if you had the opportunity to shut down communications, is it legal or illegal to do it? Or is it moral and immoral to do it? Well, it depends if that pipe bomb is about to go off. I won't get into what we do on that side of life for the military, but this is the side of civilians that we go, okay, there are things that are wise, there are things that are moral, and there are things that are illegal. You have to draw a line sometimes. because somebody made it illegal. This is my moral thing here. And it was just someone's opinion. Whatever is illegal. Just opinion. That's all it was. And everybody followed along. I question everything. It's how I have created so much. This whole thing, other than that HD tripod I mentioned, it goes in that 26-inch bag, and it weighs, 3.5 pounds maybe. Probably not even that. It's probably closer to 2.75 pounds. I was thinking about the coax being in there too. Does that help explain what it is?
Crystal clear. I see it in my head exactly what it looks like. Probably when the two dipole legs are, you said it's shaped like a V. I'm thinking of an old set of rabbit ears sticking up.
It looks like a massive set of rabbit ears, which, if you remember, you will remember correctly, it makes a rigid dipole, which was one of the requirements that I thought would be impossible to meet, which now we have a single mounting point for a dipole at the center without having to support each end, each distal end.
Wow, it's amazing.
The one thing that we did in addition to this, that same hex tenna, whose elements are 17 feet 9 inches long. Wait a minute, what? Why are they 17.9 when a 20 meter is only 10 meters? What? Wait a minute. Why did you make them so long? We made them that long so they could be a reflector on the hex tenna Yagi. Take that same concept that I just gave you, put 2 hex tennas at either end of the boom, and that's our hex tenna Yagi that we sell.
Okay, I got it now. I was going to say, what? So you put 2 of those together and put them on a boom, and you got 4 elements sticking up?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, you have a reflector, and then you have your then you have your driven element. In a V configuration, at 50 ohms on both ends, what does that do?
I don't need a tuner.
Oh, yeah, you don't need a tuner? Yeah.
Marvin, I don't need a tuner. I got my amp fixing to get it online now. I've got a 600 watt amp sitting there waiting on enough money to buy a tuner. I might just get an antenna and forget the tuner.
Well, you can just take my podcast down.
No.
Well, that's all I got.
That's a lot, Steve. Thank you so much for sharing that. I was wondering
My
how
pleasure.
it worked.
Steve, if you ever need that card done in Braille, let me know and I'll Braille it up for you.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. Hold on. How do I? Can you send me that? Send me your contact to alphaantenna@gmail.com?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Thank you. That would be helpful. We have we've been having any. So let me think here. So our loops are 100 watts, mag loops, and but on 80 meters it's 20 watts. Sometimes I spread myself too thin, and like this week I've been working 14 to 16 hour days, and next week I'm going to stop doing that. This will make my second week doing that, and as a special project we've been doing. But one of the things, and this is me and my aggressive nature for myself and wanting to create things is I gotta, and I said, and I know I said, and I told, excuse me, I know I told you I wasn't going to talk about much more on this one thing over here on the website, but since it's on the website, I'll go ahead and talk about it for just a second. We did build and successfully produce one Braille mag loop where the front of the tuning box is in Braille. And the downside, it's 50 watts. I have had 3 blind hams call and talk to me, and I gave them the opportunity to buy that one, and all 3 turned me down and opted for a 100-watt loop because I came out with the SWR sounder. They informed me that I probably am wasting my time. That these people know me, they can say these things to me, and I shouldn't pursue the Braille loop unless I have extra time on my hands, because it's a waste due to the fact that the SWR sounder works so well. I see their point. I was just looking for another way to give back, but that one might fall aside. If you've noticed it online, it may slowly disappear. Does everybody agree with that thinking? Or I'd be very interested in knowing each of your opinions on that.
I feel the same way because, 100 watts is for, except for the POTA and the field radios, which there's not as many blind hams do POTA. We're pretty much stay-at-home shack users, a lot of us. There's a few of us, but I think maximum, 100 watts would be more useful to me, and I don't know about the rest of you guys. What do you guys think? Robert? Got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the 100-watt certainly makes more sense for most people. I mean, the Braille's a cool idea, but and certainly if maybe there's a future for it if it could be developed in a 100-watt type antenna, certainly for someone who is deafblind, who can't hear the sounder. So I mean, I don't know. There's always ways to create.
It's a good point. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate the feedback, and I'll let you guys go. Thanks again for inviting me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing with us, and thanks for giving us a lot to digest. But it's all good stuff, and we certainly appreciate your effort to make equipment that's usable by as many people as possible, including us blind hams. So I very much appreciate that, and thank you for coming. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments for Steve?
Right quick, I do W5MRR.
Yeah, go ahead, Marvin.
Very quickly, would it be best to get in contact with you? The email address, alphaantennas@gmail.com. Would that be best?
That would come directly to me. We're a small company of 7, and I will see anything that comes to that email address personally.
Okay, that's my question.
Great.
All right.
And Steve,
anybody else?
Thank your son for his service.
Yes, please do.
Absolutely.
Roger. Thank you again, guys. Well, good night for now.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
All I can say, wow, the man has passion, and that's so important in business today. I've been a business owner for 40 years, and And when you have passion like he does, there's no end to what his business can do.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right. So just to wrap things up here then, I want to thank everybody again for coming and attending here with us, or thank you for listening at home after the fact. Either way, we hope that it was something that was helpful to you. And, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions or things like that, please feel free to get a hold of us. Go to our website, which again, I'll mention again, www.blindhams.com. And don't forget our podcast, and especially don't forget our YouTube channel. Remember, like, subscribe, and, watch and all that great stuff. So without further ado, I'll bid you all a 7-3, and we'll catch you on the next CQ Blind Hams Techzoom.
Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and visit www.blindhams.com.